Welcome to our Cooperate podcast, in which we discuss some of the latest developments in research and innovation across Europe. My name is Marcel Bogers. I'm a professor of open and collaborative innovation at Eindhoven University of Technology. I'm happy to be joined in this podcast by Kevin van Lierop, who's working at Brainport Development, to discuss some of the success factors of the Brainport Eindhoven ecosystem and also what we can learn from that for other ecosystems across Europe. So, welcome, Kevin. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you, Marcel.
Good. So, welcome to this podcast. So, you're working at Brainport Development, and I thought it would be good to know a little bit more about what is your role here and what does Brainport Development actually do?
So I work at Brainport Development indeed. Brainport Development is the economic development agency for the Brainport Eindhoven region. So what we do is we execute the common agenda that we have with the triple helix partners in the region. Those consists of the mayors, the industry, and also the knowledge and the educational institutes that we have here in the region. And we from the Brainport Development Organization are responsible for executing the common agenda that we have, and also bridging the gaps that the other organizations cannot fill themselves. So in that sense, we are multi-layered in operating in this region.
Okay. And so we're talking about Brainport, and obviously I'm working in Brainport myself, and I often use it as an example in my research and teaching as a good functioning ecosystem, and we'll talk more about that. But can you maybe say a little bit more, where does this name Brainport, first of all, come from?
Yes, a couple of years ago, the Dutch government decided to have two main ports in the Netherlands. And unfortunately, you cannot really translate main ports to any other language. But it means areas of a very specific economic importance. So we have the airport Schiphol near Amsterdam. And we have the seaport Rotterdam, which is a major seaport in Europe and also of highly economic importance for the Netherlands industry and economy. And Brainport is the region around Eindhoven, which is very strong in R&D, knowledge, and also innovation. And since a couple of years, the Dutch government decided that they needed to highlight also this importance by naming it as a third main port, and therefore it's Brainport.
Yeah. And then I always also get the question, so I want to transfer to you about what Brainport exactly is, also in terms of the region. I think I know the answer a little bit myself, in the sense that it depends what you really mean. That's probably going to be your answer. But still, I want to ask you, what does it exactly stand for? And what is the difference between Brainport Eindhoven and Brainport Development? And where do the boundaries really lie, let's say?
Yeah. Over the last years, you see that the term or the wording of Brainport can be used on various occasions and topics. When we say Brainport, we mean the economic area in the south of the Netherlands. So it's really the core area where we have this concentration of industry, R&D, innovation, technology, and altogether this is the Brainport Eindhoven, and therefore the importance for the Netherlands. But also in more governmental terms, you have the Brainport region, which consists of 21 municipalities. And those municipalities closely collaborate together on making that area a very strong hub for working, living, spending, and also therefore earning money and gaining more importance in the world and in Europe for the future.
Okay,
about Brainport Development. So that's a good question indeed. So what we do is we get the assignment from the municipalities, but also the industry and the knowledge institutes to develop a agenda. And this agenda is based around talent, around knowledge, R&D infrastructure, and also about societal challenges. So we focus on, for instance, how can we get more talent into the technical sector? How can we make sure that there are solutions for mobility problems around here? How can we make sure that people get healthier by applying, for instance, AI or other innovational tools? And that's what we do, basically transferring that knowledge between the parties.
So I think in general, making this link between, let's say, some of the societal challenges and the, let's say, key technologies that help to address them. So you're saying you also play a role in connecting those two, which I think is something that many organizations do, companies, universities, and so on. But what specific role do you play? What do you add to the table that really accelerates or improves that kind of connection?
I think the most important role that we play is basically providing the table. What you see when you collaborate with parties, and especially when you collaborate with parties from different backgrounds, so the knowledge institutes and the industry, for instance, we provide the table to talk, collaborate, set up the agenda, discuss what do we need to focus on for the next years. And by providing the table, we are also the party that eventually writes down what is needed and what needs to be done to get a next, we'd like to say control point, but it's mainly a specific point in a value chain. Where do we have a strength where we can really add something, and how do we sell this strength or apply this strength to a societal challenge? So one of the things that we do, for instance, is we have a lot of knowledge about cell constructions here in the area. Knowledge institutes know about it. The university know about it. Industry also have a very strong position in that. And by providing this table, we discuss about, what can we do about energy? And then we came up, we can also do a specific part in battery production. So we end up with talking about what do we want to achieve, and also how can we make sure that we, reach that goal of getting our own battery production plant or adding something to that production of batteries.
So it's really a lot of also managing that, let's say, the process, the agenda, what is important to bring the right stakeholders together to sort of shape that direction of whatever would be important in collaboration, obviously, with all the local stakeholders. And you mentioned that one of those stakeholders, obviously, is the university, at which I'm also working. So I have a little bit interest in that topic as well. But can you say a bit more about maybe the specific role of the university in this context, in the Brainport context, and what you see as one of the specific added values, and maybe also where we can still improve?
I think one of the most important roles of the university is also is providing talent for the ecosystem. So making sure that enough people get graduated and that can work for the regional industry, but also valorization of knowledge. So making sure that we have new startups. How can we valorize or monetize basically the knowledge that comes from the university, but also the other knowledge institutes, such as University of Applied Sciences and vocational institutes. And also how can the university play a role in combining knowledge and valorization with the industry, for instance. So making partnerships between industry and knowledge institutes to, bring forward new products, new solutions, new services. So I think on the point of also the education institutes, indeed something I was curious about. So of course you have, as you say, University of Applied Sciences, vocational education. So my own perspective on that is it's not so easy necessarily to bring those different stakeholders together. And as you say that you are good at building those bridges, providing the table, I'm curious if you have any experience with that or any perspectives also on how those different institutes play there. Do they play a very unique, separate role? Is there room for more coordination or integration, or how do you view that? Yeah, I think it all starts with having good coffee. So that's always a good way to get people interested at going to the table. But also recognizing that every party in the ecosystem has a different role itself to play. So the role of the university is a different role than the University of Applied Sciences. And you also need to respect that role. So it's not that you want to take over something. You leave the central role that people play or organizations play in that sense at that organization. But the thing that we add to those organizations is also how can you combine what you already do with the extra mile that others want to put forward, and how can you make that as a collaborative strength of many others?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Now, I have to say, from my own experience, of course, we're working on the Cooperate project together, which is, in that sense, a really good experience. And it's a little bit what you say. I think it's also about actually coming together, drinking the coffee, really joining forces, sharing perspectives, and working on solutions together. And I think that has been really useful to see. In that sense, also a little bit, as you say, the role that Brainport Development has in that context has been quite interesting to observe. And one of the things we also do in the project is to try to understand some of the, let's say, success factors of different place-based research and innovation ecosystems, of which we use Brainport as an example of a rather, let's say, mature ecosystem that's scoring high on the ecosystem readiness level that we are trying to develop. So could you say a little bit more about what, from your point of view, are some of the success factors that really make this ecosystem such a useful example maybe for other ecosystems in Europe to look at?
I think that many of the success factors that we have are, well, some of the success factors from ecosystems are sometimes just basically based on luck. For some elements, it's also the case for Brainport. I think we are lucky that in the past we had this huge Philips entourage which was settled here. So Philips did everything from making CDs, televisions to drying machines, for instance. Also semiconductor chips at the end. So this shared knowledge base is now still intact, but the knowledge base is now differentiated into different companies. So the network is also very strong. That's the luck that we have. I think a strong component that we have added to that since Philips has been split up to different companies was that we managed to keep the network intact, but also keep the open-mindedness and open innovation also as one of the elements that we wanted to extend, basically. So we still collaborate with each other, even though we are competitors sometimes neighbors. Both is possible, but also having an open mind to other parties outside the Netherlands or in Europe, for instance.
Yeah, exactly, because that was also going to be one of my questions. So we focused quite a bit on the local aspects, and I think I would say maybe what you call luck, I think I would partly call also like a path dependency, right? Because the fact that, of course, the Philips legacy, played that role, which is something that I can also really observe as a former student of the university and now coming back as a professor, how that really played out over the years. So very interesting to observe. Although I've also noticed lately that it used to be that anybody you met had some connection with Philips, right? As you say, that's kind of how everybody knows each other. But I also have the feeling it's changing a little bit now, of course, with the, sort of splitting up the company and sort of, the ecosystem has also developed in that way. So I find it also interesting to observe. But the thing I was also curious about, you mentioned a little bit more the international component. So can you say a bit more about the importance of the more international connections, the international outlook? What role does it play for Brainport and for Brainport Development in particular?
We focus a lot on the key enabling technologies that we are strong in. And in an international context, we always try to find European or global partners that are as strong as we are or where we can learn from. So for instance, we really dive into what do we make or what can we add on, for instance, additive manufacturing as a component, and where can we find European partners that match the knowledge and research and industry that we have in that sense. So it's always trying to find on different teams and topics, and also on different global value chains, basically, where can we add value, or where can we tap into what kind of knowledge we need here to bring some technologies further or application markets.
And are you in that sense part of any particular like networks or initiatives that enable you to make that international connection?
Yeah, I think especially when you talk about semiconductors as an example, I think semiconductors in essence is already a global value chain. And what we want to do from a Brainport perspective is bringing, we really have a control point in semiconductors. So ASML is one of the largest lithography machines production that we have here. And we want to add more, be present in more value chain positions, just as in semiconductors. So what are really necessary points where you need to be present in a value chain, and how can we do that from a Brainport perspective?
Okay. Then when you take that international perspective, I'm also wondering to what extent how do you benefit from linking, let's say, to other ecosystems? Because I think what I find interesting also, for example, in our project and in my research in general, is that it's not only interesting to look at sort of ecosystems, often place-based in themselves, but also how they connect to other ecosystems, almost like ecosystems of ecosystem, let's say, right? And like when you talk about semiconductors, I think you say it's a global value chain. So in a way, you have different hubs or different ecosystems across the world. So how do you specifically work with that, and how do you not only benefit from linking to those other ecosystems, but do you actually build these ecosystems of ecosystems? Is that something that you are working with in that way?
Yeah, I think the example of ASML is an example of a global value chain, but also with a very local component. So we have a local ecosystem, so to say, with a lot of equipment component manufacturers that together build this ASML machine. And the thing is that ASML does not sell any of the final tools, basically, or machinery in Europe. So the machines go all around the world. And I think the same goes for photonics, where you have a local, strong knowledge base for photonics. But you also need to tap into knowledge hubs from all around the world. So we did a mapping to find out where do we find photonics talents. And we can also try to map those talents and see how can we attract them to come to here to work in the photonics industry in the Netherlands.
Okay.
So you also need to find specific other places where you can tap into knowledge and see whether you can find people that also want to come over here to work, for instance, in the industry or at the educational institute.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, okay. And then who do you actually work with in those other, let's say, ecosystems? Do you have equivalent organizations like Brainport Development in other parts of Europe or the rest of the world, or do you work with the research institutes or the companies? How does that look like?
It varies. I think sometimes it's indeed a partner of Brainport, so to say, like a sister organization. Sometimes it's a Dutch government with embassies or innovation attachés that are based abroad. But also many times it's universities, it's companies, it can be very broad.
Okay, yeah. So it depends on the specific context. And then if we want to learn a little bit more about, we talked about some of the success factors of Brainport and the role of Brainport Development. And if we want to maybe share some of this experience with other ecosystems in Europe, for example, what are some of the lessons that you would share? You talked about some of the unique features. Maybe some of them are not so easily sort of transferable to other regions, but others maybe are. Do you have any key insights you say, well, for other ecosystems, look at this or that to further develop?
For developing ecosystems, I think the main tip I would give is that focus is the main essence of getting yourself a step further. Only when you focus on the strengths that you have, so see where are you strong at and really pick something. Don't say I'm strong at 15 different things. Just start with one thing, work that out, and then, along the way, it gets bigger and better. But also by focusing, you can get the essential partners on the table. You can get the essential governments around the table, industry, knowledge institutes, also funding. So instead of starting off with 15 focus areas, just start with one and then do the other 15 in the next 10 years.
Okay. And of course, if people are interested in learning more about this, they should check some details of the Cooperate project, where we highlight some of those aspects and also offer some tools that ecosystems can work with in actually further developing along those lines. But it's a good advice. So don't try to do everything at the same time, but be strategic about the focus you have in the region and get the right players on board to do that, I would say, right?
Yeah, and those tools you can really add towards your focus that you have. So it's either focusing your talent, your funding, your industry, your R&D on, one or two strong points that you have.
Good. So that's a good advice, I think. So thank you for taking the time and sharing your expertise. I think it was a good conversation. I actually learned quite a few things about how you work. Hopefully it's been useful for the people listening to the podcast as well. So we look forward to many more conversations like this. Thank you for listening and see you in the next podcast.